Thank you to my channel members and Ko-fi supporters that make these videos possible. You can also support me by buying a deck tech on my weekly Tuesday and Sunday streams. More info in the video description. Hello everyone! The bracket system has been a solid bit of structure that's been needed in Casual Commander for a long time. Now, it's not perfect of course, but you can finally have definitive answers to what a deck operating at a certain tier looks like. So that gave me enough reason to talk about optimizing a deck for Bracket 3, even while maintaining a budget, since it feels like it's definitely the new 7 of our time. This was also a suggestion from Hannah in the Discord. Link in the video description if you want to join. So to understand how to build a deck that can compete at Bracket 3, you must first understand the rules of engagement for the format. Now, that sounds a little daunting, but the rules of engagement aren't like real actual rules, but instead just the barriers to entry for a format. For Modern, for instance, you should be ready for turn 4 wins on average. You should be ready to answer Ketramos if you don't plan to win that quick, because that card can outgrind any late game strategy. And you need the ability to compete with Eldrazi. Now, Commander has some amount of difference in its rules of engagement since there's not a solid meta to help define them, but what we do have is concrete information about what a deck at this level should be able to do thanks to the bracket system. You should, in a vacuum, be able to win the game on turn 7 on average. Now this might be with combat damage, a combo, a lock. It doesn't matter as long as you can consistently cross the finish line at or before turn 7 in a regular gold fishing session. If you can't, that's okay. You just need to be able to slow the game down or be able to disrupt multiple win attempts in order to get your win off. You also need to be able to compete with at least some value engines that are game changers, whether that's by removing them or by matching them with your own busted engine of sort. The third rule of engagement for Commander is a bit looser, but something I still heavily recommend. It's to have a resilient path to victory or multiple rhyming paths to victory so that if one gets halted, you can rebuild or pivot. Of course, the secret fourth rule is that you also have to look good while winning, and because of that, I'm excited to say that this video is sponsored by Void Monster. VoidMonster.org is a new apparel and accessory site for trading card enthusiasts run by trusted friend of the channel and previous Magic the Gathering artist, Forrest Amell. Things never get stagnant. Every month brings exciting new shirts, prints, and playmats. The next drop is an incredibly cool Giant Growth t-shirt, available only until April 19th at 12 p.m. PST, so make sure to get it while you can. Thanks, Void Monster, for sponsoring the video. So then, let's tackle how we can make a deck that can conquer these major rules of engagement for Bracket 3 Commander. Firstly, being able to threaten a win by turn 7 in a vacuum. This is probably the most important of the rules of engagement. Now, I say in a vacuum because it's easier to playtest the deck this way. And if you're left untouched in a real game and the fastest you can consistently win in that ideal environment is turn 6 or 7, that's still a decent amount of Magic that was played, making for more fulfilling games. In reality, your deck might be closing around turn 10 or so when faced with interaction and threats that need to be answered. The best way to go about fulfilling this requirement is to start with your win con and move backwards from there. For example, I wanted to win with Brazella Voice of Nightmares, so I built a Hate Bear deck that could slow down the game's pace in order to help me get to the cost of that big monster, and manipulate the top deck so I could use Congregation at Dawn so I could assemble her. I wanted to win with a big flashy Living Death, so I built an Aristocrats deck to help support the bombastic lines with plenty of Graveyard Hate to break the symmetry of the spell. I also wanted to win with big sea monsters, so I built a deck that can cheat them or ramp them into play. Let your deck's engines and synergies come from supporting the win cons. Now, you can make a deck that wins slower than turn 7, but you still must respect this rule of engagement because your opponents might not be going for a win that is as slow as yours. In a deck with a slower win, you need to be ready to engage with your opponent's win attempts with either Staxy effects to preempt them, or instant speed interaction to counter the winning move. Let me put emphasis on the instant speed nature of the interaction you need. Some amount of sorceries to take out setup pieces, board wipes, or kill value engines is fine, but the bulk of your interaction, especially in a slower deck, should be able to stop a combo or hasty threat the moment it is played. This segues us nicely into the next rule of engaging with casual EDH, the ability to keep up with opposing plays. Your removal should be cheap enough, and mostly not destroy-based, to be able to answer one rings, Ristics while affording to pay the tax, getting around ward cost, or evade hexproof, because this tenacity on permanence is quite common in Bracket 3 games. Alternatively, you need to be matching their freak with either game changers of your own or with engines and synergies that can rival their power. To be clear, you don't need game changers to have a deck that is in Bracket 3. In fact, I run a couple lists I consider firmly Bracket 3 without a single game changer in them. This is due to the power of synergy and the variability of Commander as a format. The One Ring might be a broken card by itself, but Ketramos or Rishkar's expertise can easily match or blow out the power of the One Ring if given enough building around. Basically, your opponents won't always draw the Rhystic or One Ring, and even when they do sometimes, their one-card nuclear bomb can't hold up to a more synergistic multi-card engine that you construct across the table. If you aren't a draw-go super controlling deck, you should probably cut a few of the more versatile expensive spells for cheaper interaction so you can develop your board while not tapping out later in the game. Ideally ones that cost only 1 to 2 mana to hold up. This is because it's important to build your board before answering opposing plays, as to answer opposing threats before developing will just return you to parity, whereas doing it after will leave you in an advantageous position. Of course, sometimes you'll need to answer something right away, but generally speaking, focusing on your own development before worrying about opponents is the correct course of action. The last rule of engagement now is to have a diverse game plan that can pivot or rebuild with ease. I did call this a looser rule, because linear decks can flourish in this format if you're willing to accept a glass cannon deck, but if that's not you, you should probably be figuring out a way to find some tenacity. Your protection spell should follow a similar pattern to the removal in your deck. It should be easy to hold up, and most of the time it should be able to shield your board against Cyclonic Rift, Farewells, or Toxic Deluges. Even better, you should have Hate Bears that prevent your opponents from casting these spells altogether. If you're looking for protection spells, if they cost 3 or more mana, they should be phasing out your board, because Indestructible will often not cut it against a lot of the sweepers and removal you can face. Some of my favorite budget options are Flare Fortitude, due to its low cost to deploy and bonus fog effect, Guardian of Faith, which can basically be run in multiples in a deck with Court of Calling, and Eerie Interlude and Ghostway, which can't protect tokens but pair with ETBs quite nicely, especially Eternal Witness. This Court of Calling example perfectly shows how tutors at this bracket can grant tenacity to decks by being incredibly compact. They can be answers, engines, whatever you need in the moment. This is why I always end up gravitating towards toolbox strategies, due to the massive amount of agency you gain over the game from your tutor lines, leading you to never feel helpless. Though, if that's not your speed, I can totally understand. You can still have multiple game plans for your deck even without needing tutors. It's important though, when identifying your lines of play, that you make sure that they rhyme with one another and don't clash. Say you wanted to play Rakdos Sacrifice with a creature token focus. You could probably still fit a treasure theme in there just in case something like Hushbringer or Stone of Eric comes around and ruins your day. But your payoffs should not include Marionette Master, since it doesn't fit with the plan A, but instead Mayhem Devil, Marionette Apprentice, or Nadier's Nightblade that can go well with either plan. This is also where the idea of counterweight or otherwise supportive commanders can come into play. Ones that you don't need to win, but help aid the deck's game plan. For me, this is mostly what I'm on, and when I am rarely on a deck that cares heavily about the commander, they're either incredibly resilient to removal, or I pack a load of cheap and easy to deploy protection from them. The major point here is to have 1 or 2 backup lines of play that you can lean on when your first one is disruptive, that can still rhyme with your plan A, as to not be dead draws that cause you to stumble. What happens when your deck faces counterplay that shuts off its game plan? You need to be able to answer this question. Just make sure that neither of the backup plans overtake the primary plan and power level, or else the play pattern you want as a backup might just become your plan A on accident. But that's it for the video. Tell me, how do you engage with these rules of the format in your decks? Have you ever learned about them the hard way? Let me know down in the comments below, and until next time, bye!